ごきげんよう、ドクター。
Młynar is a 6-star operator that is extremely versatile. He can tank, deal high single-target DPS, or deal massive amounts of AoE damage in a wide range. He falls into the Liberator Guard archetype. Liberators in general are extremely tanky. They have absurdly high HP and very high defense with innate 15 arts resistance, so whenever their skill is active, they can easily soak in a lot of incoming damage, making it possible to position on very risky tiles and act as a bait for ranged attacks. Their base attack being extremely low is intentional due to how their trait works. After all, reaching a maximum 200% attack boost from their trait easily pushes their attack stat above 1000. In the case of Młynar, he would peak at a maximum 1230 attack. However, this would also mean that Liberators are anti-synergistic with percent attack buffers and SP batteries. As a Liberator similar to Tequila, Mwynar's weapon would also have different glow intensity, depending on how much attack boost is currently stacked by their trait. His first talent, Wanderer, increases attack modifier to 110 to 113% when attacking. When there are 3 or more enemies nearby, increase attack modifier by 115 to 118% instead, and reduce damage taken by 15%. Do note that the enemies nearby have to be within the 8 tiles surrounding Młynar before it triggers the extra attack modifier. His second talent, Unmoved, increases Mwynar's taunt level, and allows Casimir operators to reflect true damage equal to 15 to 18% of Mwynar's attack whenever they get attacked. Młynar himself is included within the Casimir group, therefore, is able to reflect damage as well. As mentioned earlier, Liberators are extremely tanky and can take a lot of punishment. Combine the damage reduction from his first talent and the increased taunt level from his second talent, Młynar can be an excellent tank. You can easily position him in the front of your squishy operators and can soak in all ranged attacks, whether it's physical or arts damage. After all, he has very high defense and 15 default arts resistance. Or, he can be positioned in the enemy's pathing too, so he can block them whenever his skill is active. This works well if you consider his default 3-block count. The only problem with making Młynar take damage is when the enemy can inflict certain status effects that prevent the affected operator from attacking, such as freeze, stun, etc. And obviously, if you make him tank an unreasonable amount of incoming damage, he can still die from it. His first skill, Unvoiced Anger, causes attacks to deal great amounts of physical damage while significantly increasing own defense within the skill duration. His second skill, Unresolved Sorrow, increases attack interval, expands attack range, and causes attacks to deal great amounts of physical damage twice for 20 seconds. If an enemy is defeated within the skill duration, the attack boost from Liberator's trait will not reset after the skill ends. This skill can be manually deactivated. His third skill, UnBrilliant Glory, greatly expands attack range, doubles Liberator's trait effect, and allows attack to deal great amounts of physical damage against up to 5 targets for 28 seconds. When enemies within the expanded attack range are attacked by Casimir's operators, they take additional true damage up to 12% of Mwynar's attack stat. Młynar himself is included within the Casimir's group. Each time Młynar defeats an enemy, his Liberator's trait effect is reduced by 10%. All numbers are assuming Młynar is at his peak operator stats. The first value means there are less than 3 enemies nearby, and the second value means there are more than 3 enemies. Let's break down Mwynar's third skill first, UnBrilliant Glory. Mwynar's bread and butter. Your best skill option if you want Młynar to cause mass destruction in a very wide AoE. The skill is very straightforward. You press it and everything dies. Unless the enemy has some gimmick. S3 peaks at 3870 burst DPS, which is quite insane for an AoE skill. Usually there's some catch when it comes to skills with extreme high-burst AoE DPS. For example, low damage per hit, which causes the skill to be weak against high armor. There's also skill uptime. Typically, such skills will have a very high SP cost. But when it comes to Młynar's S3, it's the complete opposite. S3 peaks at 4,354 damage per hit, making high armor trivial. With 28-second skill duration and an SP cost of 42 at M3, the skill has great uptime and matches up with his trait's charging time. S3 doubling Liberator's attack boost coming from trait would also mean that whenever S3 is active, Młynar's second talent will reflect more true damage, peaking at 307.5 true damage. Everything mentioned, including the defensive characteristics of a Liberator, is what's causing the hype surrounding Młynar. Being excellent is an understatement. Młynar is top tier when it comes to both his defensive and offensive capabilities. For comparison, let's take a look at an operator with a very similar skill. Silverash with S3. Silverash's S3 has a peak 1893 burst DPS and a peak 2461 damage per hit. Both numbers are like half of Młynar's S3 numbers. To make matters worse, Silverash's S3 costs 90 SP to activate, which is more than double the SP cost of Młynar's S3. As if that wasn't enough, Silverash's S3 makes himself very squishy with minus 70% defense. So unlike Młynar, who has an easy time with tile positioning because of his tankiness, it's the opposite of Silverash, who needs to be extremely cautious.
Actually, Silverash can do Helidrop strategies. Lord Guards are so powerful. Doctor, I am also a Lord, by the way.
When it comes to Helidrop rotations around the map, Silverash definitely has the edge due to his redeployment time reduction talent and initial SP of his S3. In short, whenever Silverash is retreated, he can do another S3 in another position after 73 seconds, while Młynar would take 92 seconds. You might think, Młynar's trait would not be fully utilized if he is used as a Helidrop operator. That is true, as Młynar will only be able to build around 110% attack boost for 22 seconds. But the thing is, Młynar's S3 still has a peak 2476 burst DPS if used as a Helidrop skill. That is still notably stronger than Silverash's S3. In short, if the rotation timing isn't that strict, Młynar could still outperform Silverash on his niche. However, Silverash's S3 still has those extra tile range on the sides, which combined with his faster rotations, allows certain strategies that Młynar will never be able to replicate. Silverash's talent that can reveal invisible enemies is still very useful, and some strategies require his redeployment time reduction talent for other key operators, which opens up new strategies. So no, Silverash isn't a dead operator. In fact, just use both.
Yes, my sword may shatter and explode like daggers, but offer me the ricochet right back at you like pouring rain. Oh, you would trap 1,000 nameless pawns without cages, without chains. The ones who we lost from your wars we fought were all puppets in your game.
Some notes from Młynar's S3 is that the ideal scenario is to be able to attack multiple tanky enemies at once. By being able to attack more than 3 enemies at a time, he is getting a 15 to 18% DPS increase from his first talent. Just remember that these enemies have to be within the 8 tiles surrounding Młynar. The worst case scenario is by killing squishy enemies before focusing on an elite or boss enemy, since there is a minus 10% attack decrease on his trait per kill. This also translates to 148 to 154 DPS decrease per kill. But before I end S3's breakdown, I want to address in advance the incoming, actually Dreamy, Młynar's S3 have great synergy with Gravel and Proviso. Gravel and Proviso are Casimir's with very fast attack speed, or at least when Proviso have their S2 active. This means that they would deal a lot of true damage against enemies within Młynar's S3 attack range, right? No. If you really want an operator that synergizes well with Młynar, simply use a buffer or debuffer. Instead of gaining roughly around 150 to 300 plus extra true DPS through other Casimirs, use something like Axe S3 instead. He will provide Młynar's S3 a 65% DPS boost, which translates to an extra 25-16 burst DPS. While we are on this topic, let me add that the best support for Młynar's S3 would be Ak S3 followed by Bard Skadi S3 and Suzuran S3, both able to provide around 40 to 46% DPS boost. Ak and Bard Skadi to match Młynar's S3 rotations. Just that there would be 8 seconds on Młynar's skill duration, which doesn't benefit from Ak and Skadi's buff, since their buff only lasts for 20 seconds. Suzuran to maximize the 28-second burst duration of Młynar's S3, but the skill rotation will increase from every 70 seconds to a minimum of every 85 seconds. As explained earlier from Młynar's archetype, he does not synergize well with percent attack buffers such as Warfarin. At best, Warfarin can only provide up to 18% DPS boost within her S2's duration. But screw the math, right? Here are some clips to show whether what I'm saying is accurate or not.
All you would show to working men is your crooked crescent lips. Their limbs and their throats just hang by threads.
And speaking of synergies, Młynar has a special synergy with Guard Gavial where their skills can infinitely rotate with very minimal downtime. This following clip would best explain it.
Harden my soul into steel. Yes, my sword may shatter and explode like daggers, but offer me the ricochet right back at you like pouring rain. We would trap 1,000 nameless pawns without.
I guess that's it for this excessively long breakdown. Overall, S3 is an extremely powerful skill that overshadows both Młynar's S1 and S2. There is nothing much to say about Młynar's S1 and S2, so instead of a breakdown, here's a quick summary. S2 can be better than S3 if Młynar is only up against one enemy. The problem with S3 is that, due to its wide range, it could easily kill random stragglers. With just one kill, it will reduce its DPS close to S2's DPS. And of course, with more kills, it will start losing against S2's DPS. Unlike Młynar's other skills, S2 is synergistic with SP batteries because of its feature, which prevents Liberator's attack boost from resetting whenever their skill ends, as long as Młynar is able to kill an enemy within S2's duration. Maintaining Liberator's attack boost at max whenever S2 ends would also mean that Młynar is more effective at reflecting true damage through his second talent. As for S1, it allows Młynar's to peak at 803 defense for 30 seconds. He still has around 2,400 plus peak burst DPS, so combine that with his high survivability, taunt, and 3-block count, he becomes a combined DPS plus defender. Just that, it is weird to use S1 when you can just outright kill Młynar's enemies with S2 or S3. After all, the faster you kill an enemy, the less damage they deal to you. The skill is also quite wonky to use since Młynar basically stops blocking and defending whenever his skills are down due to Liberator's trait. In general, due to Liberator's extremely low base attack and high attack percent boost coming from their trait, you'd avoid using percent attack buffs. For example, Stainless's S1 has the highest percent attack increase currently in the game, which is 96%, yet if factoring in diminishing returns, it can only provide up to 32% DPS increase to a Liberator with maximum attack boost. For Młynar's S3, the anti-synergy with percent attack boost gets worse, since S3 improves the trait's attack boost from 200% to 400%. For example, Stainless's 96% attack buff will only provide up to 19.2% DPS increase in this case. So, as mentioned earlier, use Axe S3 for a 65% DPS boost. Bard Skadi S3 or Suzuran S3 for around 40 to 46% DPS boost, more or less depending on their potential ranks. Let me teach you a lesson. Overall, Młynar is an extremely powerful meta operator that can easily destroy your enemies. Doesn't matter if the target is alone or not. The only thing that can stop Młynar is enemy gimmicks. Should you try to pull or build Młynar if you get the chance? Yes, absolutely. People say that Młynar is like another sniper Chen getting introduced into the game, but if we're strictly accounting DPS, Chen doesn't even come close to Mwynar's numbers. The only reason to use Chen over Młynar is if you need an AoE DPS that has the ability to hit all enemies within their range. Not to mention, Chen can reduce both the target's defense and movement speed. But if it's strictly raw damage, Młynar is way ahead. Młynar will also prove himself extremely useful in the future Reclamation algorithm mode. He is able to chop wood at high efficiency, which is a requirement to build wheat fields, making Młynar true to his name's meaning, Miller. For skill mastery priority, you can simply M3 his S3 and be done with him. S2 is okay, but is extremely niche. S1 is just a questionable skill. And that's it for now. Like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more content.